We use the word property all the time. My property, your property, intellectual property. It seems pretty simple, right? But what if I told you that the legal meaning of that word is one of the most complex and honestly fascinating ideas in our entire society? Let's get into it. Just think about it for a second. You say you own your phone, but what does that really give you the right to do? And maybe more importantly, what does it stop other people from doing? That's really the question we're digging into today. So, to get to the bottom of this, we're going to peel back the layers of what we think property is, and right away, the very first thing we find is kind of surprising. Okay, so check this out. We all instinctively think of property as a two-way street. It's a relationship between us and our stuff. Me and my car, you and your house. But legally, that's not it at all. Property is actually a set of relationships between people about a thing. It's all about what you can do and what I can't do in relation to that car or that house. It's a total mindbender. And this quote just nails it. The law doesn't really care that much about the physical object itself. What it cares about are the rights you can enforce against everyone else in the world when it comes to that object. It's not the thing. It's the right. That's the absolute key. So, if property is this collection of rights, what does that collection actually look like? Well, for centuries, lawyers have used this really powerful metaphor to explain it. They call it the bundle of rights. Let's unpack what that means. So instead of thinking of ownership as one big, solid block, I want you to imagine it's a bundle of sticks. Each one of those sticks is a specific right. A legal scholar named A.M. Honore laid a bunch of them out, like the right to physically possess something, the right to use it and decide how it's managed, the right to get any money it makes, like rent from a building, and of course, the right to feel secure in your ownership. And this is where that metaphor gets super useful. You can actually hand some of your sticks to other people. Just think about a landlord. They own the house, right? But they give one really important stick, the right to possess it, to a tenant. In return, they get rent. But the landlord keeps the other sticks, like the right to eventually sell the house. See? Ownership can be split up. Okay, so you've got this awesome bundle of rights. But, and trust me, this is a big but, that doesn't mean you can do whatever the heck you want. Holding that bundle comes with some serious responsibilities. In law, there's this big, fancy concept called plenary property rights. It's basically a formal way of saying that for the good of the public, the government can and absolutely does put limits on your property rights. Your private ownership exists inside this larger public framework. And you see these limits everywhere once you start looking. Your right to use your house doesn't include the right to let it become a fire trap for your neighbors. If you write a book, your copyright doesn't let you stop a critic from quoting parts of it in a review. We call that fair use. You can't even just destroy certain types of property if doing that would harm the community's heritage or the environment. Basically, your rights end where public harm begins. So where did we even get these weirdly complex ideas about bundles and limits and all that? Well, like so much of our law, they're basically ghosts from history. Our modern property rules are built on some very, very old foundations. Long before Europeans arrived, this land was governed by diverse and sophisticated indigenous legal traditions. But the system that a lot of Canadian common law inherited, it has a totally different origin story. It really kicks off with the Norman conquest of England way back in 1066, which set up feudalism. And then that whole system was formally imported into much of Canada with the Royal Proclamation of 1763. And that feudal system completely flipped the idea of ownership on its head. Forget about buying and selling land like we do today. Under feudalism, no one truly owned it, except for the king or queen at the very top. Everyone else, from the highest lord down to the smallest tenant, just held the land from someone above them in this huge pyramid of obligations, usually in exchange for loyalty or military service. And get this is the most shocking ghost of all. That 1,000-year-old idea that all land is ultimately held of the crown is still, technically, the foundation of real estate law in most of Canada today. It means you don't have absolute ownership of your land. You have what's called an estate in it, held from the crown. Wild, right? This brings us to the final and maybe the biggest piece of the puzzle. How does Canada's modern constitution, the highest law of the land, actually protect this fundamental concept of property? Well, the answer? It's complicated. That's right. You can read the Charter of Rights and Freedoms from front to back, and you will find freedom of expression, the right to life, liberty, and security. But you will not find a clear, standalone right to own and enjoy property. It was actually debated when they were writing it, and in the end, they just left it out.
Which, raises a pretty huge question, doesn't it? If there's no right to property in the charter, does that mean the government can just take your stuff whenever it feels like it?
Well, not exactly. Instead of one single powerful right, Canada has this really complex web of protections. First, ancient common law says the government needs clear legal authority from a statute to mess with your property. Second, our Constitution splits up powers, so different levels of government have to stay in their lane. Third, other charter rights can indirectly protect property, like your right against unreasonable search and seizure. And finally, and this is a big one, international trade agreements create some of the strongest protections, but often only for a very specific group, foreign investors.
And that brings us to this final, pretty provocative thought from one legal expert. This unique Canadian approach has led to a strange, or as they put it, incoherent situation where international investors can sometimes have clearer, stronger legal protections for their property in Canada than Canadians themselves do. It really leaves us with a question: what does it truly mean to own something in a country where the right to do so seems to be protected everywhere and yet nowhere all at the same time?